By 2024, horror wasn't dying, it was rotting. Studios had stopped taking risks. Sequels, remakes, and jump scare clones had turned terror into a parody of itself. Even the diehards, the ones who never gave up on horror, started to whisper the same thing. Maybe the genre they loved was truly dead. And then, when horror hit its lowest point, one film rose from the grave. A film nobody believed in, tore through audiences like a virus. Critics called it disturbing beyond reason. Theaters reported walkouts. And somehow, it made millions. But how did one movie do what an entire industry couldn't? And why do some still say it never should have survived? Because behind its success lies something no one in Hollywood wants to admit. Before this film hit theaters, horror was drowning. Studios weren't chasing fear anymore. They were chasing formulas. Every new release looked the same, but somehow, each one cost more to make and scared less. Audiences weren't terrified, they were tired. The genre had lost its pulse. By 2024, horror wasn't just struggling, it was in a coma. Critics stopped writing reviews. They started writing obituaries. And when fans begged for something new, studios answered with another remake. But behind the scenes, something was brewing. A pair of directors who'd already shocked the world once were quietly building something else, something darker, something that didn't care about trends or algorithms. They didn't just want to make another horror movie, they wanted to make people feel unsafe again. The kind of fear that follows you home, the kind that doesn't end when the credits roll. And when their new film finally hit theaters, people thought they knew what they were walking into. They thought it was just another scare. They were wrong. When early test screenings began, nobody expected much. A small Australian studio, a modest budget, no major stars, but word started spreading. Not from critics or trailers, from people who saw it. They said audiences left the theater pale, some crying, some silent, some refusing to talk about what they'd just seen. By opening weekend, that tiny film was already doing the impossible, selling out theaters across Australia. And every headline asked the same question. Where did this come from? It wasn't backed by a billion-dollar franchise. It didn't have nostalgic characters or cheap shock value. It had something Hollywood forgot, pure, psychological dread. And before long, that little film didn't just scare audiences. It terrified Hollywood. Hollywood was not terrified because the film was loud. It was terrified because something it tried to bury clawed its way back. So, what exactly woke up? The resurrection did not come from screams or shadows. It came from an emotion audiences thought they had already outgrown. Why did this film know how to reach that nerve when others failed? Here is the real fracture point. Why does Bring Her Back feel nothing like the dozens of stories about loss we have seen before? What truth is it touching that other films never dared to approach? It refuses to treat grief as metaphor. It treats it as mutation, a force your body twists around without permission. So, what exactly is mutating? The first trap sits in the title. People assume the question is about bringing a girl back. But what if the film is whispering something darker? What part of you does grief try to resurrect? When grief amputates something vital, what instinct tries to rebuild what you cannot live without? And what if the reconstruction becomes the threat you fear most? Identity never collapses in a scream. It fails the way a lung fails, quietly, invisibly. So who is suffocating first, Andy or you? Watch The Quiet Rooms. Why do they feel like they're waiting for someone who is never coming back? And why does every silence feel as if it is the one listening? In most stories, the father's death is a narrative tool. Here, it behaves like a controlled detonation that bends the emotional gravity of everyone inside the house. What orbit is it pulling them into? Andy is not playing the role of protagonist. He is survival, wearing human skin. Every choice he makes feels less like bravery and more like a brain in triage. If Piper is the last unbroken piece of him, what happens when the cost of protecting her becomes too high to pay? Identity never fractures alone. It spreads like heat through a closed room. So, what internal fracture is Piper holding together? And what breaks open when she finally speaks? Her blindness never behaves like weakness. It behaves like sensory overload. If she hears something inside herself that no one else can face, what is that sound? Notice the shift when Laura walks into the house. The walls react first, as if recognizing something the mind has not decoded yet. What memory inside this space is waking up? And why does your body feel it before your brain does? Laura is not the villain. She's grief that metastasized into identity. Her daughter died, and the woman she used to be died with her. If devotion rebuilt her into something primal, at what moment does devotion turn into possession? And once devotion mutates, it no longer protects you. It protects the lie you need in order to stay alive. What lie is Laura protecting, and what happens when someone threatens it? This is the turn. Grief stops behaving like pain and becomes survival. But what part of you must die before that survival begins? The house is not haunted. The people inside it are. So what happens when their haunting attaches itself to someone who still believes they are whole? Every photograph becomes a resurrection attempt. Every rule becomes an anchor, holding a collapsing reality in place. Every gentle gesture stretches a filament, keeping Laura from shattering. How long can a filament stretch before it snaps and reveals the truth it was holding back? When you descend deeper, the real horror surfaces. The danger is not the dead. It is the human instinct to resurrect what cannot be accepted. And once you begin resurrecting the past, what stops the past from resurrecting you? Most horror films show you the dead. Bring Her Back shows you the mind that refuses to let the dead remain dead. What does that refusal turn you into? That is why the film hits so violently. Because at some point in your life, you have been each of them. Andy, surviving the impossible. Piper, sensing the truth before anyone names it. Laura, gripping what is gone, as if your hands alone could hold the world in place. This is how Bring Her Back resurrected horror. Not with spectacle, but by exposing the terror no human escapes. When you lose someone, a part of you begins dying in their place. So what happens when the part you lose is the part you needed to stay human? And that is only the surface. Because once grief stops describing who you are and starts rewriting who you become, the real horror begins. When the characters cross that fracture point, what exactly do you recognize in yourself? Some horror films scare you, some disturb you. But Bring Her Back does something almost no modern film even attempts. It folds your own mind into the narrative. Because underneath its plot, underneath the trauma, underneath the supernatural, there's a deeper, more dangerous idea. What if grief doesn't just change you? What if it replaces you? When the mother begs for her daughter to return, the film doesn't treat it like a plea. It treats it like a ritual, a surrender, a deal we've all made without realizing. If life tears away something we love, we'll carve something out of ourselves to fill the void. And this is the brilliance people didn't see at first. The monster in Bring Her Back isn't a demon. It isn't a ghost. It isn't even the child. The real monster is the part of you that cannot accept reality. The part that whispers, if the world won't give her back, I'll become whatever it takes to bring her back myself. And every scene after the midpoint is built with one terrifying purpose: to show you exactly how far a human being can warp when grief becomes their religion. Most horror films take you into a haunted house. This one takes you into a haunted identity, a self that's cracking, fracturing, until you're no longer watching a character lose control. You're watching a soul rewrite itself. And that's why the fear hits so deeply. Because somewhere inside you, it forces a question you didn't consent to face. If someone I loved was truly gone, what part of me would I be willing to sacrifice just to feel them near again? And this is where the film stops being sad and starts being dangerous. Because from this point on, the horror isn't happening on screen anymore. It's happening inside the viewer. Bring Her Back never wanted to scare you. Not really. It wanted to reveal something. Something most horror films are too afraid to touch. Something most people spend their entire lives running from. It wanted to show you that grief doesn't disappear. It doesn't heal. It doesn't fade. It transforms. And if you're not careful, it transforms you. And that's the twist that almost everyone missed. This was never a story about a mother trying to bring back her daughter. It was a story about a mother trying to bring back herself. The version of her that died the moment her child did. Every ritual, every hallucination, every impossible sound creeping through the house. They weren't hauntings. They were echoes of the person she used to be, trying desperately to return. But here's the most disturbing part. The movie doesn't judge her. It doesn't punish her. It doesn't even warn her. It understands her. Almost too well, because it knows something about human beings that we never say. We all have someone we wish we could bring back. a person, a moment, a version of ourselves that we trade anything just to feel again. And that's what makes this film so powerful. Not the scares, not the supernatural, not the mystery, it's the honesty. The terrifying honesty that grief is not a ghost that haunts us. It's a doorway, and we're the ones who choose whether or not to walk through it. So when you ask why Bring Her Back shook audiences, why people left theaters silent, why it spread from a small Australian film to a global phenomenon, it's because the movie didn't try to entertain you. It tried to understand you, and for a moment, just one moment, it made every person watching ask the same question. If the past called my name, would I answer? And that is the real reason Bring Her Back is the most frightening horror film of this decade. Now, we've talked about how Bring Her Back shook people to their core, but there's something even darker happening in theaters right now. There are scenes, real scenes, that made audiences get up and walk out. If you want to understand why those moments break people in ways normal horror never can, watch this next video.